You are entering one of the most mysterious and misunderstood places on the face of the Earth. This is the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, in an area that has stirred the imagination of man for centuries, where ships, planes, and people have vanished without a trace, and for no apparent reason. Most of them end up here, in the peaceful, silent darkness of the deep. Those who know about it have names for this area: the Graveyard of the Lost, the Hoodoo Sea, and the fatal Twilight Zone, among others. But for most, there is only one name, and it spells intrigue to all who hear it. They call this the Bermuda Triangle. This is the coast of Florida, on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. Good evening, I'm Richard Crenna. More than 1,000 people, several hundred boats, and dozens of airplanes have entered the triangle, never to be seen again. Many claim to have experienced strange forces affecting their ships and aircraft. So, what are these bizarre forces that have made the Bermuda Triangle this deadly graveyard? Is there anything to the myths of abductions by aliens from other planets? Or people transported into some parallel universe, perhaps even trapped in a time warp? Or were those lost just the victims of amazing natural phenomenon, more powerful than anything they could have imagined? Tonight we're going to expose this treacherous area of the sea and reveal some of its secrets. Using deep ocean vehicles, we'll examine wrecks, the haunting ghosts of the deep that litter the ocean floor. We'll investigate some of the most baffling cases in Bermuda Triangle history. The legend dates back to the days of Christopher Columbus, 500 years ago. The Bermuda Triangle includes almost 500,000 square miles between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Some astonishing incidents have happened here. In 1963, the Marine Sulphur Queen, a 425-foot freighter with 39 on board, disappeared. Just 6 months later, 2 giant KC-135 Air Force jet tankers suddenly vanished from the skies. An ocean-going tugboat named the Good News found itself in a tug-of-war with unknown forces while hauling a 2,500-ton barge through the triangle. A DC-3 en route from San Juan to Miami with 36 people on board disappeared into the void in 1948 after receiving landing instructions from the Miami control tower, with the coastline in full view. And in 1986, a man and his wife piloting a PBY from Bermuda to Florida reported flying into what they called an eggnog-like substance. $2 million worth of electronic instruments on the aircraft suddenly went dead. In World War II, the Avenger was heralded as the world's best torpedo bomber. But when a group of them flew into the Bermuda Triangle on a training mission, they made history for a very different and bizarre reason.
Towers, this is Taylor. My compass isn't working. Boy, what's your compass read? I don't know where in the hell we are. We got lost after that last turn.
Port Everglades to FT-28. Lieutenant Taylor, can you read us?
Affirmative. We just passed a small island. We're not sure of our position. We seem to be lost.
This is Port Everglades. Suggest you have another plane with a good compass take over the lead.
Roger. This is really strange. We don't seem to know which way west is. We can't be sure of any direction.
Yeah, just fly west. We can get home.
We're going too damn far north instead of east. If there's anything, we wouldn't see it. Flight 19, listen up. Sooner or later, we're going to have to ditch unless we hit landfall. All planes fly close formation. When one plane drops to 10 gallons, all planes ditch together.
Is that a ship on the left?
Lieutenant, can I drop the rest of my bombs? Yeah, by all means.
This is Port Everglades to FT-28. Did you receive my last transmission? Change to 3,000 kilocycles, please.
We may have to ditch, Lieutenant.
14 Navy airmen were flying in 5 planes, just like this. The Avenger, TBM bombers, the largest single-engine aircraft used in World War II. The strange disappearance of Flight 19 on December 5th, 1945, remains to this day the most prominent incident of all the Bermuda Triangle tragedies. It was one of the worst naval aviation disasters in history. A massive sea search was launched, but nothing was found. Family members accused the Navy of a cover-up. Eventually, a Naval Board of Review determined that the flight had disappeared for reasons unknown. The loss was described as the strangest ever investigated in the annals of naval aviation. They searched over 360,000 square miles of the ocean, but they found nothing. After they were reported lost, the Navy sent out a Martin Mariner search plane with a crew of 13. It too disappeared. The flight instructor was Lieutenant Charles Taylor. He was a seasoned Navy combat pilot. Recently transferred to Fort Lauderdale, he was not familiar with the area. Another member of the squadron was Lieutenant Ed Powers. His wife recalls the tormenting moments after she heard the news.
I woke up the night it happened at about midnight and called the base because I just had the feeling that something was wrong. And they told me that Ed wasn't there. They didn't give any explanation. And then the next day I heard it on the radio that 5 TBM planes were missing from Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station. And I knew it was them.
At the time, there were people who believed that the crewmen may have been abducted by space aliens. Years later, in his movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg featured that theme by having the planes discovered in the Mexican desert and the pilots returned by spaceship.
I think the theories regarding UFOs and space warps are pretty wild. I think at first when I heard them I was sort of clutching maybe this happened and maybe there is some hope that they survived some way.
Well, who could have known that half a century later the search for those 5 Avengers would still be going on? The research vessel Deep Sea embarked on the latest effort to solve the mystery of Flight 19. Leading the expedition is world-renowned adventurer and ocean engineer Graham Hawkes, who is no newcomer to the search for Flight 19. The location for the search had been the object of a 12-year quest by John Myhre, a former FAA official and highly decorated helicopter combat pilot in the Vietnam War.
Everything that's involved in navigation, I extracted. I got 1945 maps, found out where the variation was, and I've got variation down to within a ½ degree. People that were in that area that night later recounted that they had tremendous seas. They've never seen such seas. When the first guy crashed, Taylor said beforehand, about 30 minutes before, hey, first guy goes down, we're all going to ditch together.
Right.
Okay? First guy did ditch.
And then the weather's so bad they visually lose contact with each other?
I think that's probably what happened. I don't.
So they didn't deliberately break discipline. They lost contact and then became every man for themselves.
So sometime in this area here, he was convinced, or his students convinced him, or they mutinied, and made a 180-degree turn and headed westbound, which is what they should have done in the first place.
But he thinks it's over the Gulf of Mexico
Right.
here, and west is out in the ocean.
Absolutely.
Constantly.
Yeah.
It's a pretty terrible mistake to make.
And this is where, this was the first scientific guess. That's where I pointed it out. And it actually turned out to be about 4 miles north of my final estimated position, which is right here.
Okay, so this is a refined version of that.
That's exactly what it was.
You know, it's a brave man that puts the next on a map. It's a big ocean that he will. We'll search this area, kind of limited by time. If it's in there, we find it. But you know, it's a big ocean there. Tell you, Joan, if we find it, take my hat off to you.
Okay.
In fact, I'll eat it.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that.
Myhre had high hopes, for the goal of finding the Avengers had become an obsession with him. He had been disappointed before. 5 years ago, on a similar expedition, he had located a crashed Avenger. But when brought to the surface, careful examination revealed it was not from Flight 19. Graham Hawkes had shared a similar experience when several years ago he discovered a cluster of 5 Avengers. After announcing that they may be from Flight 19, the press twisted the facts and claimed the missing Avengers had finally been found. 2 days later, Hawks held a news conference to correct the story.
The unenviable position of telling you that we're now quite certain that 5 aircraft we found are not those of Flight 19, but in fact a second group of 5 Avengers.
So the search for the Avengers was not new to either man. And to complicate matters, close to 150 Avenger bombers are known to have crashed off the Florida coast during the war. For Graham Hawks, finding Flight 19 would be a perfect prelude to his ultimate goal of making a solo dive to the very bottom of this planet. Regarded as one of the world's best-known innovators in ocean engineering and exploration, he has earned the reputation of being the Enzo Ferrari of the sea. Hawks heads the Ocean Exploration Group in California. He has designed many submersible vehicles and shares the world depth record for a solo sea dive. Recently, he designed Deep Flight 2, a submersible similar to an airplane, which he hopes to pilot to the deepest spot in the world's oceans, the Marianas Trench. The research vessel Deep Sea embarked on the latest effort to solve the mystery.
Fish we've seen on the
Could this
whole
be an
trip.
airplane? Could this be an airplane? He's freaking out, yeah.
I think he's wrong. I think it's an airplane.
It could be anything, John.
We'll just continue on down the track line and searching. We don't know.
Roger that. I'm sorry, I don't believe in things that aren't fair.
As it turned out, it wasn't an airplane. John Myhre's frustration mounted as the search intensified.
I've been on it for 12 years, and everybody in the world, Navy, Coast Guard, everybody says I'm crazy. I may be, but I also believe I'm right in this instance.
The search continued as a vicious storm hit and rocked the ship. The decision was made to abandon the search, as there was just no evidence of any downed aircraft at all. Now the Deep Sea turned south to head for an area where Graham Hawks had evidence of an aircraft, possibly an Avenger from Flight 19. Normally, the Deep Sea roams the oceans in search of sunken Spanish galleons. It is operated by the Scientific Search Project. In the process of treasure hunting, they discovered hundreds of modern-day boats and planes on the ocean floor. Now they're using their high-tech equipment and years of experience in an effort to help solve the mysteries of the Bermuda Triangle. As the Phantom ROV plunged deeper and deeper into the ocean, a stunning discovery was made at 750 feet beneath the surface. It was the unmistakable image of an airplane, an Avenger bomber.
FT-87.
FT-87. What's the water depth?
767. Get camera down a little bit. That's great.
Take a look at the life raft.
I think it's right behind the pilots there.
I think it's up there. I think you can see the small names on it.
Yeah, life raft inside. The door's closed, though.
Yeah, you know, on that other Avenger, the restored one, it was on the starboard side. I wonder if there's two.
Well, the main canopy's pulled open, but there's a bulkhead.
Okay, so it looks like the pilot got out. Yeah, I think the aft crew go out through a hole on the starboard side. We haven't seen that yet. Do not stand on walkway while wing is folding. Well, that paint holds up. Take a look in that gunner's turret, Brett.
You should be able to get right inside. That's a big opening.
Yeah.
There we go.
Well, there's so much stuff in there you can bang your head on if you get a ruffle.
The television cameras sent back stunning pictures of the crashed airplane below. It sits in a treacherous environment where the pressure is so intense it would crush a human's lungs. The once proud Avenger is now draped with iron-eating bacteria and seaborne anemones, small animals that have latched onto the cockpit walls and become permanent
Quite an
residents.
artificial reef.
Surprising, 750 feet. Why didn't you go over, bring the ROV around to the other side, Brett?
By reversing thrusters and directing the rudder control, the pilot is able to maneuver the ROV for a closer look.
That's the life raft hatch. You know, it looks like it's open. Oh, good, the side is open. Can you get in closer? So it means that the pilot got out on the starboard side and deployed that life raft. So the crew did get out, or at least the life raft was deployed. Look at that white coral on the machine gun muzzle. That's a little bit of poetry.
The crew was eager to examine the serial numbers to see if there was any connection to Flight 19.
Okay, you know that bureau numbers, we're going to have to dig those out, Brett. I think it's underneath the star there.
Buried with all this silt. Let's see if we can blow this away.
Yeah, if you put them on light setting, the blowers, we won't damage the paint.
Here we go.
Just dig it out.
Yeah, I'll reverse the blowers and suck the water right out of there. Pull some clean water in. There, you can start to see the fuselage, just a rivet line. And can you check the book there? I think the numbers are supposed to be right in this area, right by that seam. They're definitely not on the whole.
And so the fate of Flight 19 will remain a mystery. Somewhere here in this vast expanse, the secret of what happened to those 5 bombers remains securely locked in the deep, dark waters of the Bermuda Triangle. At least for now. The drug corridor between the Bahamas and Florida is filled with powerful boats crossing at high speeds. But reckless smugglers often become victims of the unforgiving sea. They wind up here, ghost ships on the ocean floor. This area, known as the Bermuda Triangle, involves 500,000 square miles of deceptively inviting ocean water in the midst of one of the world's busiest commercial shipping lanes. It also happens to be one of the pleasure boating capitals of the world. Put it all together, and you have one of the largest concentrations of boats on the globe. So perhaps it's not surprising to learn that the ocean floor of the Triangle is littered with wrecks of practically every size and shape. The deep sea came upon the ghostly remains of a sleek, high-masted racing sailboat. Her name was Yankee Girl. There were no sails on her masts. Amazingly, they were all stowed and her hatches were wide open. Knowledgeable sailors say that this is an indication that something was deliberately amiss and that this boat ended up on the bottom, a victim of mysterious circumstances in the Bermuda Triangle. As the search continued, another mystery ship loomed out of the abyss and into view. She was a sport fisherman, a pleasure boat from Miami. An investigation revealed that it had been owned by a man in Clearwater, Florida, who reported he sold it to someone in Miami in 1982. Her name was the Big Mom. The trail ended there. The windows and hatches had been blown open by the air trapped inside the hull as it descended. The rudder and steering gear were missing, which could have happened when the boat slammed into the ocean floor. The captain's chair was in the engine hatch, which may be a clue that something ominous happened here just before she sank. The ocean has a way of erasing clues that could explain how she ended up here. It is another of the many unexplained disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle. One of the greatest mysteries happened in March of 1918, when the USS Cyclops, a 19,000-ton Navy coal supply ship, sailed from Barbados bound for Baltimore. One of the largest ships afloat at the time, she carried a crew of 309 men. Somewhere during its voyage through the Bermuda Triangle, the Cyclops vanished. For years, science has tried to explain the loss of this and other ships, and they've come up with some fascinating theories. One involves what are known as freak waves. These are gigantic ocean waves that seem to come out of nowhere and overtake a ship completely by surprise.
There are so-called freak waves in the area of the Gulf Stream, and the main reasons for these waves are the, first of all, the current and the winds generally in the Gulf Stream when these storms come off the coast from the United States wind up just causing the waves to be much larger than they should be. And another thing, the warm air that's above the Gulf Stream sort of feeds the storms. So you wind up with waves that might be, instead of 10 feet, maybe 15 or 18 feet in a small boat at night, encountering over a period of 15 minutes waves that change from 10 to 18 feet could really be a disaster, especially if pretty much everybody's below deck sleeping.
Yeah, freak waves do occur in the Bermuda Triangle. In fact, I have a very interesting case that we just got through working on. It's a freak wave that occurred and actually came ashore along the Florida East Coast, and Daytona Beach caught the brunt of it.
Some freak waves have been measured at over 100 feet in height. Another possibility involves methane hydrates. When methane gas escapes from vents in the ocean floor, the frozen gas bubbles rush to the surface.
If a ship was in one of these methane areas where the methane was bubbling at a great rate, what you would get is the density of water would be decreased to 20 to 30%, and a ship going through that area would lose buoyancy and sink rapidly. And actually, we've had offshore oil rigs that have had deposits of gases released, and when these deposits were released, the rigs did sink very quickly because the buoyancy of the water was no longer there to hold them up. If we could propose that there was some bubbling methane coming up from areas in the Bermuda Triangle, this possibly could be related to some of the problems that we see out there, unexplained disappearances.
To support this theory, oceanographic studies have determined that the floor of the Bermuda Triangle is one of the richest hydrocarbon gas deposits in the world.
Okay, I've got a visual on it. Big cigarette
A boat similar to this that recently sank off the Florida coast was carried by the powerful underwater currents of the Gulf Stream across the Atlantic Ocean. It was found off the coast of England.
See, look, there's a line tied onto the handrail back to that anchor that's on the back seat. Look, there's a spotlight. See that?
Cord hanging down.
Yeah, that's a spotlight hanging. See the white cord?
Down there in the bottom.
This probably happened at night. Looks like this boat's been down long enough to have kind of sunk during the heyday of all the drug running out here over to the Bahamas. They probably had engine trouble and just foundered. These boats have such low water line. If it was rough seas and they lost their engines, they probably knew they were in trouble. Had the anchor ready, the lines were all tied off, and probably just took a few good waves over the back. Nice boat when it's smooth, but when it gets rough out there, these probably not the safest thing to be in.
Miami approach control. This is Piper and 39.
Frank inbound from Nassau. I'm having engine problems and my instruments are acting up. I'd like to request a radar vector straight to Miami International. Over.
Roger, Piper 3994. Runway 9 left is active at this time. Contact Miami Tower when you're 5 miles out. Over.
Mayday, Mayday. This is Piper and 3994. Frank,
I'm losing altitude. I'm going to have to ditch. I think I'm 20 miles east.
Roger, Piper. This is Miami approach. We have you on radar. We'll notify rescue immediately. Good luck, sir.
Over the years, hundreds of aircraft of all sizes have disappeared while flying through the Bermuda Triangle. One airline pilot reported encountering what he called a block of air at about 5,000 feet over the Gulf Stream. He said it shook his plane like a terrier shaking a rat, and then tossed it out at 15,000 feet. He said he was lucky to have lived through it. And then there are those stories about abductions by UFOs, space warps, magnetic grids, and other strange, unexplained forces. One theory claims that when an airplane's compass is going haywire, it's because a UFO mothership is high above it, and when it veers off, the compass will follow it.
If that sounds strange, remember it was Albert Einstein who first realized that space and time were connected. Scientists are investigating gravitational fields over the Earth. Could this help explain disappearances in the Bermuda Triangle?
A strange incident happened on board the Queen Elizabeth in one of her transatlantic voyages. She was followed by a plane, and the plane, with the obvious idea of entertaining the passengers on board, came quite close to the ship, turned around, and then went a little bit in front of the ship. As it did, at the end of the first turn, it disappeared. Naturally, the word was taken by many people that it had fallen into the ocean, but it couldn't have fallen into the ocean with so many people watching it at the same time. It just disappeared from the air.
We had a case of an Air Force Boeing B-50D Super Fortress, like a Super B-29. It was on the way from lodges in the Azores Islands to Bermuda. They were 25,000 feet when the radar operator had Bermuda on his radar scope noticed that the airplane was no longer moving along the surface of the Earth. He called the pilots immediately. They called Bermuda, who had the B-50 on their radar. Now, no one can understand why for 1 hour, with 4 powerful piston engines and 2 jets going at full blast, this airplane did not move forward 1 inch. They went lower, they went higher, and nothing they did would make the airplane change position. Until about an hour later, it slowly began to leave whatever was his force field. And we really don't understand what it was. And the airplane finally landed in Bermuda. They burned about 70 minutes more fuel than they'd burned in any other mission between the Azores and Bermuda. And officially on the books, there is no explanation.
For many years, there have been reported sightings of unidentified flying objects in the Bermuda Triangle.
They are more frequent over what we call the Bermuda Triangle than other areas of the sea, but of course they have been seen in most places on Earth and certainly over the seas. I think that the next few years will definitely prove it one way or the other, because they're there, whether they are a reflection of something that has happened in the past, or, and I've often wondered about the possibility of this, if the UFOs we see today may really be from our own future.
Perhaps the strangest explanation for the loss of aircraft and ships in the Bermuda Triangle is because that's where the lost continent of Atlantis is supposed to be. Some people believe that ancient astronauts from other worlds have been visiting Atlantis on a regular basis. And every so often, they take a human home with them.
Many believe that Atlantis is located in the Bermuda Triangle, just off the island of Bimini. It's where you find the mysterious Bimini Road. Graham Hawkes went to take a closer look to see what he could learn.
This is the eastern road, and that dark outline over there, that's the western one. They're approximately 15 yards apart, and they're 5 to 6 yards wide each. We're going to come up around here into the wind and anchor more towards the southern end of them.
It's a 2-lane highway?
That's it, 2 lanes.
In the late 1960s, a startling discovery was made here off the coast of Bimini. A cluster of huge submerged stones in the form of a road. These stones, ranging in size from 1 to 10 tons, appear to have been fitted together by man and has convinced believers that this was part of Atlantis. The Atlantis legend dates back over 11,000 years and concerns a magnificent island empire in the Atlantic. It was described as a civilization unequaled before or since. It supposedly disappeared beneath the surface in a matter of hours, leaving not a trace behind. There are also those who believe that there may be giant power crystals deep in the earth here. They supposedly help guide UFOs from other worlds and might be the source that affects compasses on both ships and airplanes in the Bermuda Triangle.
Really can't see why some people would think that that was man-made.
They believe that this is Atlantis, that this is one of the first
signs where Atlantis is beginning to show itself, and they believe that over a period of time that more and more and more of the civilization will be able to be seen.
I guess if you believe in that, you can see that road. Some of those edges are pretty straight, but kind of not quite enough to convince the skeptic.
It's hard to prove one way or the other, and it's not enough to change anyone's mind one way or the other. There's a little bit too much uniformity to the design to think that it's just natural.
Many pilots have reported erratic behavior of their instruments when flying near Bimini.
Back in the late 60s, early 70s, I used to charter back and forth to the Bahamas on just about a weekly basis. And about 30 or 40 miles west of West End, flying back, if the sun was just right, you could look down and you could see these roads underneath the ocean that appeared to be running in perfectly straight lines that had been covered up millions of years ago by the ocean. And right about that area, not every time, but quite often, you would get a massive magnetic deviation on the compass. The compass would just spin round and round. You'd fly through it in about 20 miles, and then the compass would settle down, and you pick up your original track again.
I've heard that when boats and aircraft are going through the Bermuda Triangle, that there are occasions when compasses will spin. As far as we know, there is no reason for the compasses to spin because of the magnetic field. That is, if an aircraft or a boat is rocking, then the compass normally has an oscillation. But any measurements that have ever been made of the magnetic field have never shown this particular phenomena. And there have been many measurements in the Bermuda Triangle as well as elsewhere on the Earth.
Frequently, we've found that the experiences of aviators contradict current scientific evidence. Aboard the deep sea, an extraordinary discovery is made. They send the ROV down to look inside a small aircraft.
All right, we'll hold station here until it clears. Okay, I've got a visual on it. It's been down here a long time. Look at the whole roof is starting to cave in. Okay, let's get a better look at this. Okay, here's the number N3647Q. No, it looks like both the doors are latched all the way closed, except this one window's knocked out.
Yeah, at the top there is separated. I wonder if it cracked up on the landing.
Well, these planes have got a fixed gear, so they probably don't work very well for water landings. As soon as they hit, they must flip over.
In an attempt to examine the interior of the cockpit for evidence of valuables or human remains, a decision was made to use the ROV to try and gain access into the plane through the rear cargo hatch.
Well, from what I could see through the window, fortunately, it didn't look like there's anybody in there. It looked totally empty, in fact.
Seems a little odd that all the pilot's doors are closed. I mean, if you ditch this aircraft and escape, you're not going to turn around and shut the door again, are you?
Gently caress it open.
No, you got to stow it in, Brad.
Yeah, well,
I ain't gentle about this.
Okay, there we go. Boom, boy, this crash bar is really working good. Oh, there it goes. See, the hinge is busted.
Yeah.
These planes are really built light. See the honeycomb in the side here? The whole side just opening up.
Yeah.
There we go.
Oh, you got it open?
Yeah. I can get ready with
Giving way under the pounding pressure from the ROV, the door began to crumble away. This allowed room for the remote vehicle to get a clear picture of the inside of the plane.
Up there. One of those jump seats.
Yeah, stuffing out.
Ah, look at all the dirt in there. This thing is a mess.
There was nothing there.
The backs.
No valuables or mysterious cargo. The deep-sea engineers decided to attempt to open the sealed doors to the passenger compartment.
Looks like the only thing in the cockpit here is this, looks like a satchel or...
Oh, pan down.
It's open, or, you know...
Maybe it's a visor?
It looks like a sun visor, I think you're right.
Yeah.
The attachment point's falling down. It's totally empty in here.
Just all the garbage.
Still falling down from the roof. What about the dashboard? Does that have keys in it?
Keys in the ignition.
Don't they have keys on these planes?
Oh, come on, Brad, if you're going to ditch the sea, you're going to take the keys out? Hope these guys got out of there, but gosh, you don't know.
Should be records with the FAA. We've
The
got
plane,
numbers now.
a Piper, had been stolen 15 years ago from the Pompano Beach airport. There had never been any word on its whereabouts. The police said they assumed the plane had been stolen and used to run drugs. But there is no evidence to indicate how the pilot or any passengers could have escaped. In the Bermuda Triangle, very often a perfect day can turn into a nightmare.
Thousands of boats fill the marinas along the coastline here in Florida. Every day, untold numbers venture into the waters of the Bermuda Triangle. Occasionally, these boats never return. One of the biggest news stories of recent years concerns a prominent Florida restaurateur named Charlie Myhre, who sailed with his wife and another couple on a pleasure cruise from the Bahamas to Florida. His 40-foot sailboat, Charlie's Crab, was named after his popular chain of restaurants. Myhre, who was regarded as an accomplished sailor, ran into a violent storm, and the boat disappeared. It resulted in a massive search by Air Force and Coast Guard planes.
At dawn, the search planes took to the skies. The surprise storm was already being called the storm of the century, with fierce winds in excess of 60 miles an hour and sea swells of 20 to 30 feet.
According to the Coast Guard, it's typical of what can happen in the heart of the Bermuda Triangle. And it has nothing to do with space warps, UFOs, or laser beams from Atlantis.
We think that they made it to within about 30 miles of the U.S. coast up by West Palm Beach. But they were in that position about the same time that a very terrible storm front came through. It was the storm of the century in March of 1993. And a dozen vessels just off Florida were lost that day. 10 fishing boats, another sailboat, and a 225-foot freighter were lost at sea, most off the west coast of Florida. The Charlie's Crab, we're not sure what happened. We suppose they got caught in the weather, and it is the reason they were lost.
As reports of the seriousness of the storm reached Coast Guard headquarters, it became apparent that Charlie's Crab was not the only ship in distress. Rescue calls were coming in from points all around the Florida peninsula. In this dramatic footage, a family is about to be rescued from a floundering sailboat. The high winds and deep sea swells made it a perilous exercise for everyone. By the end of that day, a total of 162 people had been rescued by the Coast Guard from the raging waters of both the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. However, there had been no sign of Charlie's Crab.
We searched over 110,000 square miles, all the way from the Bahamas and the Miami area up to the North Carolina coast. We actually searched an area that's bigger than the size of the state of Florida and South Carolina combined. And we never found a trace. The only clue as to where they may have gotten in trouble was a cellular phone call made during the passage of the storm front around 4:30 in the morning that Saturday, March 13th.
Ken, what about the cell phone? Does that give us a clue?
Well, it can help in that we know that Early in the morning, there was a distress call, a 911 call from the vessel Charlie's Crab, and that was received by the Lantana Police Department. Based upon available FCC records, we plotted the 3 closest cell sites in relation to where the 911 call was made. We could use that information based upon the information you have and try to come up with where the boat might have gone down.
So that kind of fits in with the possibility he was knocked down very quickly. His VHF antenna in the water, and then he has to use the cell phone to try and make a 911 call. And if we put that all together and we're lucky, and that's right, he's right in about here.
For additional help, the crew met with a skipper who had formerly worked for Charlie Myhre.
What do you think happened to Charlie's Crab?
I thought that probably the boat sunk in a hurry, that it probably may have knocked down. That storm hit with a tremendous force very, very quickly, and the position that he was supposedly in was at the axis of the Gulf Stream. Waves can get tremendous size, and any person caught in that situation could get themselves in trouble in a hurry.
Early in the search, the sonar indicates that a large ship has been found. The deep sea makes a turn to investigate. However, the sonar seems to be entangled in the wreck. They launch the ROV to examine the seriousness of the situation and investigate what they hope might be the missing Charlie's Crab.
Should have a visual on it.
There it is. Oh, it's ugly.
Steel, a big fishing trawler or something.
Yeah, it's got fishing numbers on it.
Coming up on the stern here. Can you make that out? There's the whole port there. Opus.
Corpus Christi, Texas.
Corpus Christi.
It's a big trawler. It's a big net dragger. I'd say she's probably about 120 feet long. Graham, you see that ornamental paint job right on the bow there? The yellow stripes?
They had discovered a large fishing boat owned by a man in Texas. He said that the boat was returning to Texas when she ran into a sudden storm. However, an exploration of the ship revealed that the outriggers, which hold the ship's fishing nets, were locked in the upright position. This was an unsafe condition which would have made the ship unstable and prone to capsizing. Expensive and nearly new at the time of her loss, the Michael J was named after the owner's young son. Not only had they failed to find their intended target, the sunken sailboat Charlie's Crab, but in the process of investigating this wreck, the Bermuda Triangle suddenly cast its spell on the deep sea and seized their expensive side-scan sonar equipment. It had become entangled on this rusting relic. It was a major dilemma.
That's what we hit.
Yeah.
About 40 feet off the deck. Straight into that. What a nightmare. You know, that cable's lying alongside the hull. Maybe we can cut it right there. Maybe we could ram it, sandwich it between the hull and bludgeon it to death.
Looks like those windows are out. Maybe that's an indication that it was scuttled.
It's pretty corroded.
Because there's some electronics in there, it probably wasn't scuttled. See, there's a radar up there, some sort of electronics here. Certainly wouldn't scuttle a boat with electronics in there.
The Michael J has now been found. The owner told us the sailors survived the sinking. But Charlie's Crab remains a prisoner in the Bermuda Triangle.
Ever since Christopher Columbus noticed something strange going on here 500 years ago, an air of mystery has surrounded the Bermuda Triangle. And through the years, the legend has continued to grow. But as you've seen, many of these mysteries have now been explained. Scientists know much more about the deep oceans, weather patterns, freak waves, and other phenomena than they did 20 or 30 years ago. But even today, our study of the oceans is considered to be in its infancy.
There must be huge basic discoveries that just await us down there in the ocean. A small example, the areas we're working off here in the Bermuda Triangle was we found some holes cut in the fabric at the bottom. They're 100 meters diameter, vertical side. They're probably part of an ancient system that was formed. But if these holes can be unknown in 1994, 7 miles off Miami, what lies out there in the really deep ocean? We just don't have a clue.
Although present scientific knowledge says that the Bermuda Triangle is a place where nothing abnormal is happening, I can't for 100% certainty say that there isn't something out there that we will discover in the future that will change our scientific thinking about that area.
Until we know more, such theories as aliens from other worlds will continue to fascinate and intrigue us all. And who knows? We really can't say it's impossible. What we can say is most likely there will always be a Bermuda Triangle. I'm Richard Kremen.